right, good morning. Good morning, everybody. This is the next Spice Up for CIONET, and today with Peter van Burgel, CEO of the Amsterdam Internet Exchange. In short, very short, Peter, what is the Amsterdam Internet Exchange for, well, the very few people that don't know?
So the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, it says it on the tin, it's an internet exchange. The internet is a network of networks. There's about 50 to 60,000 networks globally, and they all need to be interconnected one way or the other. And one way to do that, the most efficient way to do that, is through an internet exchange. And it is literally that, it's an exchange where companies come together and exchange internet traffic. So I think that's the shortest way I can explain.
And it was founded as a foundation in 1994, if I recall well.
Yeah, so 1994 was the first time the name AMS-IX was mentioned. Like the internet, it came about through the university
channels.
And universities wanted to work together. So AMS-IX as a concept started in 1994, and then very shortly thereafter a foundation was founded to start an organization that could actually take care of that traffic. A couple of years later, in the year 2000, a limited company was set up, and the foundation is still the single shareholder of that limited company, and I'm the CEO of that limited company. So for all intents and purposes, we're a normal organization, but with a non-profit shareholder, that original foundation.
Okay, thanks for that information, but it's 30 years ago.
Yes.
And we thought it was a good idea to, let's say, review a little bit what has happened, but above all, what is coming.
Yeah.
Is the role of AMS-IX, will it be the same in the next 30 years, or will it change completely?
That's the million-dollar question, of course.
What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. So so it of course will not remain the same. Like the saying goes, right? In Dutch we say stilstand is achteruitgang. So in English, it's like no progress is decline.
Yeah.
So also AMS-IX needs to change, and we need to change also because the environment, I'll call it, of the internet and everything that has to do with it is changing as well.
How is the market changing these days?
So I think there are two components to that, which is also very much about AMS-IX. So we can talk about that a little bit later if you want. But on the one hand, there is the technology development, and technology is developing ever faster, of course. But there's also the real life changes that are happening. So think of things like geopolitical tension. Think of things like the Great Firewall of China, or think of some of the conflicts we're currently having with Russia and the Ukraine, or in the Middle East. And all of those also have a cyber component or a digital component to it. And that is, of course, having an influence on how the internet works and operates. And that's even without challenges around things like privacy.
Because you have EU regulations that are coming up, that are becoming more strict. But I fully understand. So geopolitics is changing your market as such, because the consideration being active in Russia it could be 20 years ago, could be an option. By now it's no option anymore, for example.
Yeah, so if we go back sort of that 30 years and we look at how the internet came about, so it was universities that wanted to share information, and there's a whole story about ARPANET and the Department of Defense, and we won't go into that. If people want to know, they can look it up.
1969 already,
or whatever.
We go back then. Yeah.
So when we look at sort of the start of the modern internet, it was universities trying to share data, and a somewhat interesting anecdote is that the first email ever outside of the US landed in Amsterdam with the Center for Mathematics related to NICF, which is still doing research in small particles. But that was also in a period, early 90s, where it was the end of history, and capitalism won, and the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Fukuyama, 1995.
Exactly. So it was, unlimited innovation and all of this, and a very different mindset and how to look at growth. So the internet sort of exploded onto the world, also because it happened in a timescape where that was possible. Fast forward 30 years, I think we start to realize that the digitalization, but also part of that through the internet, is coming at an expense. It's coming at an expense of environment, or I think it's capitalism in general, but the internet is not isolated from that. It's the environment, it's privacy, it's
the footprint, the CO2 footprint of data production.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's a lot of sort of adverse effects we're seeing of the digitalization as well, or sort of the capitalist development we have seen. And I'm not against capitalism. Don't get me wrong.
No, but it has effects. Yeah.
But the realization that it's at the expense of a lot of other things is also kicking into the internet. And the knee-jerk reaction of governments always is to then start regulating. So in Europe we have the Digital Markets Act, DMA, we have the Digital Service Act, we have the Cybersecurity Act, we have NIS2 coming, we have a plethora of rules and regulations that is coming down the pipe, where governments, specifically the European government, is trying to regulate the internet, but they're trying to do that in a way to protect us, basically, as users of the internet, because if we don't, we're sort of free game.
Is it in Europe, because you're a European player?
Yeah. It's global, but
it's a global player, but you're based in Europe, so the EU regulations come for you directly.
Yeah.
In the competition from the US or whatever, because there's also competitors that do the similar things that you do. Can they act more freely in the market?
So on the level we operate, which is very much currently in the connectivity layer, not so much, because it is very much bound by technical standards and agreements how to. The internet works because we trust each other to apply the rules and the regulations of this sort of connectivity layer, and that's why it works. So it's not that they have an advantage over that. I think if we look at content and things like AI, most recently Apple launched their new iPhone, and their AI functionality, how much it is or isn't, is not available in Europe because they're not sure about the European regulation.
Now, the same as the Meta glasses.
Yeah, I think
for example,
there's a lot of politics at play here, right? And they're trying to influence, of course, the European politicians to sort of waiver some of this. But so it's more on the content and the device side that there is potentially an advantage for non-European organizations. For us, connectivity-wise, not so much. Having said that, the way Europe and the Netherlands specifically are developing compared to, for example, the US, and the speed with which the US is sort of bouncing back after the economic downfall, but also the capital that is invested in things like AI. I think the top 4 hyperscale companies here, Microsoft, Google, Meta, AWS, I think they combined invest $100 billion a year in AI, where the European Union announced they're going to invest $20 billion.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a difference, partially because of law and regulation, but also simply because there is more money to be spent and more pace to be made. So yeah, we are, as Europe, but also as AMS-IX, we're definitely facing that, and of course trying to figure out how to deal with that. Do you foresee that probably AMS-IX is moving away from Amsterdam outside the European Union? Is that an option in the future? Well, never say never, but it would really be a last resort.
Yeah,
I think. So where the Amsterdam Internet Exchange would be weird to be situated in London or Paris.
I would say so, but you know, there might be considerations on the one hand, and the other hand, like, okay, maybe geopolitics forces us to have a sort of internet island within Europe with different rules as well.
Yeah, so there's a couple of aspects to try and answer that question. So as an organization, I don't foresee us moving out of the Netherlands because of like Shell or Unilever or whatever. It's not anything like that. However, when we look at the growth, the Netherlands being a very important connectivity point in the world, being the number 1 means there's less growth in the Netherlands than there is somewhere else. So when it comes to growth of internet traffic, we see a lot of that happening abroad. Africa as an example, more than 1 billion people, the average age being 20 and a half. So that continent is going to explode in terms of internet and digitalization. It's just a matter of time. So there's a lot of growth opportunity there. So also for us, part of our revenue, the international part of our revenue will most likely grow just because the market is there. So that's one. The other thing, however, is that we also, of course, see that in those areas, they already start to have similar discussions like we have in Europe. Do we allow this to be boundless, or how do you call it? Without limits, limitless, right? Or do we sort of look to Europe with a false eye and see, well, it's maybe not so bad, TSA or DMA or all these regulations?
Well, a lot of regulations are, in the end, are taken over by the rest of the world.
So when you look at GDPR, for example,
this is a good example
in Dutch. It's not a law in other parts of the world, but companies that want to do business with European companies have to comply with GDPR as well, otherwise they can't work. And Europe is still a big market, so that's where there is also that power. So I do see a more important, bigger part of our revenue coming from abroad, but I don't see us move there quickly, no. What we do, however, is when we look at our mission and vision, it's that we want to contribute to a better society through a better internet. And what we're seeing is that the model we have, so with a non-profit shareholder, but having a for-profit company that basically runs the operation, is also a model that starts to resonate because of these other elements at the expense of everything we are sort of growing. So we're seeing that actually quite a few companies are interested in it. So how do you balance this making a profit but still doing good?
Yeah.
So a lot of our time, my time, is also spent in talking to regulators, and when they do come up with regulation, at least try and come up with regulation that is workable and can be applied within organizations. And of course we do more of that in the Netherlands, given we're part of vital infrastructure and we've been here for 30 years. But also when we go abroad in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, we talk to governments and regulators to try and help them come up with better regulation for the internet.
And project yourself in the 10 years. I mean, what I also read and heard, excuse me, is that are we investing enough in our hardware infrastructure in terms of new C cables and whatever? Because so far we were blessed by the Amsterdam Internet Exchange because we are in the middle of the internet. We need it to be. No. But are we still in about 10 years? Because there's also new cables and they're just not landing in the Netherlands, I heard.
Yet.
So what is the concern there?
So the concern there is, again, if you're the number one, there's only, you can only go down, basically. Yeah. So it is important to, to protect that position. And I think more and more the realization is sinking in also with Dutch politicians and in The Hague that we need to protect that position. So we've become, so when we look at the level of digitalization and digital skills, the Netherlands is number 1 or 2 or 3 in the world for many, many years. So it's also about the population and the capabilities of our society. But that has come for a large extent because the market built that capability. The government allowed for that, of course, but didn't really sponsor or help. What we're now seeing in Europe, to start with, is that our surrounding countries, France, Germany, the Scandics, the governments are really investing in digital because they see, digital is something, it's never going to go away. No. It's too important. It's becoming of strategic importance. The war in Ukraine is showing that we're also vulnerable because it's assets that people can touch and destroy. So there's a lot more focus on digital around us than specifically in the Netherlands. Now, luckily, the government is realizing that, so there's a lot of initiatives in building that. And one of those, specifically because you ask about sea cables, is we have been able to set up a so-called sea cable coalition, which is with the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and they interact with the other ministries and with a number of private organizations, including us, but also SURF, for example, and Digital Realty and KPN, where we are actively pursuing opportunities where we want to bring new sea cables into the Netherlands. Yeah. So 10 years from now, I'm pretty confident we'll have new sea cables and enough infrastructure. And let's not forget, there's also a lot of terrestrial stuff, of course, across Europe. But when it comes to sea cables, I'm pretty confident. A bigger challenge currently is to figure out how are we going to deal with data centers. So there is a lot of pressure on data centers because of the energy use and the footprint. However, again, Economic Affairs published a report about the real impact of the digital infrastructure, and the total energy consumption of all the data centers together is about 3% of the total in the Netherlands. So it's not a lot, you would think. Now, in certain places, it can be if there's a concentration of data centers, of course.
Yeah, compared to other sectors, it's
so
doable to see like what is the economic the value of it and the footprint.
Then actually the economic value is really high compared to the footprint. And when we look at the square meter footprint, it's 0.08%, I think, of the total land square meters of the Netherlands. So actually the footprint is relatively low, but the financial return is quite high. But still we have a challenge with data centers. It's not a popular thing currently. No. But there's an interesting view at it because data centers can also be part of the solution through our energy transition.
Yeah.
Like I said yesterday, I was at one of them and they basically position themselves as, he said it quite funnily, I mean, look at us as a green electric heater. Because we take in energy, we of course run applications and all of et cetera, we produce heat, and we're willing to actually give away that heat to farmers or houses or et cetera.
Yeah.
And if we do that well, we're actually helping to bring down gas usage. Yes, we use electricity. We have our own ground station, so we can actually go from high voltage, low voltage. So they can really help in dealing with this energy transition. So rather than look at it as, oh, they're just eating all the energy and taking all our water, it's actually part of the solution when we start to integrate it in our thinking. So again, 10 years from now, I think when we are able to develop that type of policy, we bring in new sea cables, look at data centers more as part of the solution, I think we can still be at the forefront of this and actually also use that innovative power to again remain leading in the world of digitalization. But then not so much for keeping out the water, but actually helping in the energy transition that basically all of the world needs to go through. So I'm positive. But it's going to require a lot of people and also companies, your audience, to think about this and how, where do they store their data and why, and do you want to keep all that data, yes or no?
Do you want to have it locally, or that's where do you want to store it? How do you want to store it? And data hunger will always be there. So in my view, you will be there in about 10 years and doing pretty much a lot of the same stuff. But nevertheless,
it's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah, but nevertheless, I can also imagine there will be new kinds of products or services you want to develop. Are there any you have in mind already?
Yeah. So like every other company, of course, we're also focused on sustainability, but it's really looking at our own footprint as well, and how can we bring that down, etc. But in doing that, and like I said, working with data centers, we're also trying to figure out if there are services and products we can offer our customers to help them through that transition as well, or potentially help them get to a greener data center where there's less energy consumption, for example. So that's one line of thinking. But a little bit more short term, what we're seeing is there's a lot of pressure currently on trust and security and where's my data and can I trust the high?
Data sovereignty. We have had this discussion before together.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of pressure on that, and I think that's where you'll see a number of services come from us as well. And one of the first that we will probably launch early next year is time services. And it may not sound like, there's been a lot of time already for a long time, and you can get NTP, standard time services, quickly, but we're also going to offer PTP, which is basically atomic clock-based, hardware-driven precision time. And if you realize that the majority of organizations, they have hundreds, if not thousands of transactions a day, and in the digital space, all of them are depending on accurate time, there is actually a need for accurate time. That's one. Secondly, again, through geopolitical stress, we see, for example, that the Russians are disrupting the GPS time signal. So aeroplanes
to manipulate
the rockets, of course, flying in and to manipulate GPS. So again, hardwired time is important. So when we think of these things and we think of, okay, so if my company is in the transaction business and time is important for me, and I'm now relying on GPS signals to do that, or
you're not really sure anymore.
I'm relying on a service that is using GPS signals, then I'm not really sure if I have accurate time. Think of the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, for example, right? It's very important, or interest traders or commodity traders. And we can then offer accurate time based on atomic clock.
It has value.
So that also is an element of trust. You can actually trust the signal of that. So to some extent, it's going to be about really that sort of almost hardware type services. But you'll also hear a lot more about how do you actually implement NIS2? What does it mean as a company director to have personal liability to take care of your security? You could either ask your lawyers and make it so that you minimize the risk, or you could actually pick it up and drive it forward to actually become safe.
And how does a service from AMS-IX looks like then? If you think about NIS2.
Yeah, so part of it will be about awareness. So we'll do awareness campaigns where we'll talk about it first and foremost, but also explain what we're doing. We'll get sessions like this going, where we explain, really try to explain it on more boardroom level and senior management level than technology. What does it mean? Because there's also a supply chain implication in NIS2, for example. So that's one, awareness. Others maybe, we're thinking about, can we organize workshops where we really bring people in and together and have experts explaining them what it means and how do you implement it. But there's also an angle into sort of technology services. Some of the people listening may already have this, where you have subscriptions for vulnerability checking, for example. If you have certain equipment, do you have vulnerabilities and how do you deal with those? And on the one hand, that works really well. However, what we're finding is that getting the signal and then not being able to do something about it, is it then worth getting the signal?
Yeah.
Or it's a bit like in your car, if the one of the yellow lights comes on and you don't deal with it, in the end you're going to be next to the road with a broken car, right?
Depends on the car.
So well, there's that. But you need to figure out how to deal with that and how do you manage that risk. So again, from our own experience, also being part of vital services, so we're very close to this, we think we can help companies to actually implement this. And by implementing it, the inference of it is that we also create a safer digital environment. So it's not just about because the law says so, but it's also about really trying to make a better internet by having more companies implement these rules and regulations. So it really becomes safer for you.
Yeah, but that is a shift from the more functional role you had in the past, now to also the consultative role.
Yeah.
Guys, we brought you a secure and robust internet exchange, but now to make it sure that you need to understand how it works and what the implications of new regulations are.
Yeah, so there is, because a lot of our customers, they deliver all kinds of, I'll say, technical services. So we have many customers on our platform that deliver firewalling or anti-DDoS or antivirus or all these things. Cloudflare is a company that many people know, one of our customers, for example. So why would we develop these services ourselves if there's perfectly fine companies that can do that already? So we don't want to sort of compete with our own customers in that sense. But what we're seeing is that a lot of that technology is known, but this is much more a boardroom thing. This is about liability, this is about risk, this is about what do you do when you have ransomware on your platform? Are you prepared? Do you know how to negotiate? Do you actually have Bitcoin if you need to pay in Bitcoin? How do you...
Contingency planning.
Exactly. So a lot of it is about realizing that digital is critical to your operation. And as a board member or as a company director, realizing that it's on you to work with your security team, but also work with your connectivity team to deal with this. Maybe back to the sea cable as another example. One of the sea cables we're trying to land in the Netherlands is a cable that actually goes up north and across the North Pole into Asia. And one of the reasons why we are trying to get that in is that all our current connectivity to Asia either goes through Russia or through the Suez Canal.
Yeah, so it's vulnerable.
2 choke points currently in the world, and the Suez Canal really because there's many disruptions, and Russia, of course, for obvious reasons. So all our traffic to Asia currently is going through 2 choke points. So again, from a strategic autonomy standpoint and a sovereignty standpoint, it's good to have an alternative that is not going through these 2 choke points.
Which also is close to the logic of internet, because you should always have an alternative route.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is just a small example where we think we can help organizations to better understand some of the myths of the internet and how to deal with that. And that's more a consultative sell indeed than it is, of course, connectivity. Having said that, we still want to sell connectivity and lots of it. So it's not that we're giving up on that, But we think an additional added value is our knowledge and experience in the past 30 years on how to have a reliable and safe service, because the world is changing, and it's no longer about just having a firewall. A lot of it is much more about, are you prepared? Things like zero trust. So do prepare for ransomware. Do prepare for, and being part of vital services, really means that we have this target on our back. We know that whether it's nation states or criminal organizations, we are an interesting target. So we have to work hard to remain safe.
To remain safe. Yeah.
And that experience we want to share with others and see if we can help.
Well, on that note, Peter, you keep the world safe, at least on the data level. Thank you very much. This was the Spice Up with AMS-IX, Peter van Burgel. Very interesting, Peter. Thank you very much. See you next time.